The GOP war on facts and democracy continues and has spilled over into the California recall election. So, for months, there were people who were pretty unhappy with Governor Gavin Newsom, mostly, of course, right wingers, who petitioned a recall election and got crushed. So, now, full disclaimer here, I don't live in California. I don't really have a lot to do with California politics, but I take it on pretty good authority that Gavin Newsom is a corporatist, that he's not a very good governor, he's not very progressive at all. So I understand why there are left wingers that were like open to this, right? Like, okay, yeah, let's recall Gavin Newsom, right? So now, as this progressed, however, the only front runner that actually had a legitimate chance of beating Gavin Newsom and becoming the new governor was Larry Elder. Larry Elder. So now, as bad as Newsom was, Larry Elder's about 100 times worse. The guy called to eliminate the minimum wage. Set it down to nothing. Zero minimum wage, okay? You also had him trying to call to get rid of mass mandates. He even wanted to give reparations to the slave owners, not the slaves themselves, or I should say the descendants of slaves, but the descendants of slave owners. What? Okay, so interestingly enough, the Republican Party actually found a black man so willing to sell out for power that he would support the descendants of slave owners and try to give them money. That's crazy. That's crazy. So now when people realized that Elder was the most likely person to replace Newsom, a lot of the voters, they bit the bullet, and they said, all right, as much as Newsom sucks, we're going to vote no on the recall. And some people, by the way, did write in their own candidates. There was some Green Party representation. Look, that's fine. And look, again, it looks as though Newsom won. He's gonna remain in office. So now another reason that people voted for Newsom to keep him in office is to prevent, and of course prevent Larry Elder from taking over, is because you had that whole issue with Senator Dianne Feinstein. So Dianne Feinstein she's ancient. She's on her last legs. She's not doing well. Let's just say that. So now that's not me saying it. Okay, this is people who know her, people that have been in meetings with her, and here's what they say. This is according to a person who had attended regular meetings with the senator over the course of many years, who described an obvious, if not persistent, change in her behavior. Starting under President Obama, I began to notice she seemed confused in meetings. The former government affairs executive who did not want to be identified to avoid causing trouble for the large firm that employed him. But it was inconsistent. Sometimes she was clear and coherent in meetings. Other occasions, she didn't seem to understand the issues, and sometimes even the person with whom she was speaking. So that inconsistency there, that is a problem. And it's, again, like, this is part of aging. She's 87 years old. And sometimes, look, when people get old, things happen, okay? Things start to slip. And that's just mentally. Politically, of course, she wasn't at all in line with the progressive agenda, with the progressive wing of the party. Again, very corporate, very centrist, and not in line with actually the voters of her district, which, again, overwhelmingly vote for her, but understand that it's not because it's really because they don't have any other progressive option. And I show you that because a recent poll by UC Berkeley's Institute of Governmental Studies showed only about 35% of Californians approve of the job that Feinstein is doing. She's not representing her district in a progressive way, and therefore people are like, well, we're not really happy with her. We'll still vote, for her because we don't really have any choice, but we're really not happy with her. All right, so now, the thing that ties this with Feinstein, why I'm talking about her, is that, well, if Larry Elder had been replaced, if Larry Elder replaced Gavin Newsom as governor of California and something happened to Dianne Feinstein, you would see a situation where Larry Elder would then be responsible for picking the replacement. So that would be disastrous for the Senate, which right now, 50-50. It would have been 51-49, now in favor of Republicans. And look, right now, we have a problem that not a lot is getting done in Congress right now. You get another Republican in there, Absolutely nothing's getting done. That's it. Lame duck. Lame duck. Can't do anything anymore. We can't even talk about doing anything anymore. We're done. We're done. Disastrous, right? So no doubt that would please the Chamber of Commerce, as well as Mitch McConnell, which is why, look, a lot of right-wingers are like, no, keep Feinstein in office. She's fine. What are you talking about? And look, there are corporate Democrats as well, and Feinstein herself that are super stubborn, like, no, she will retain her position and serve out the remainder of her term and probably run again. No, there is a time to replace people. And when you start getting super confused in meetings and not knowing who you're talking to, well, it's time to go. It's time to retire. I mean, again, she served a very long and illustrious career, and it's time to go, right? Get replaced. Bring in somebody who's a little bit younger, more progressive. All right. That said, Elder knew, I think Elder believed that this was a pretty big long shot and had a plan. What was that plan? Declare voter fraud, of course. Before Tuesday's vote, the radio host declined to say if he would accept the results, reportedly dodging the question when pressed by NBC News correspondent Jacob Soboroff. Let's take a look at that video.
Whether or not you win or lose, will you accept the results of the election tomorrow?
I think we all ought to be looking at election integrity, no matter whether you're a Democrat, an independent, or a Republican. Let's all make sure that the election is a fair election. So let's all work together, no matter what the results are, to make sure that the results are valid and legitimate, and everybody who voted should have voted. Let's all do that together.
Is that a commitment to accept the results of the election tomorrow?
Let's all do that together. Let's all work together on both sides of the aisle to make sure that the election is a fair election.
Look, I know there's a new Matrix movie coming out, and I'm excited for it, by the way. But like, you don't have to practice by dodging questions, all right? You're not the person who has to be dodging things. Okay, that's Neo's job, all right, and whoever else is with him. You're not in the Matrix. Stop. Answer the question, and he can't. This is like, oh, I'm not going to accept the results. You know what? Voter fraud. Of course, because on Monday night, he urged his supporters to use an online form to report voter fraud, which claimed that it had detected the fraud in the results of the recall, resulting in Governor Gavin Newsom being reinstated into office. And so, look, on Monday, again, the problem with that, of course, is that the link was live on Elder's campaign site, even though the election had never even happened. No results had been released. Elder was still campaigning, and nonetheless, he's out there saying that, oh no, the voter fraud. We have detected fraud in an election that hasn't already happened. In fact, here's what the website said. It said in one of the bullet points, statistical analysis used to detect fraud in elections held in third world nations such as Russia, Venezuela, and Iran have detected fraud in California, resulting in Governor Gavin Newsom being reinstated as governor. The primary analytical tool used was Benford's law and can easily be readily reproduced. The site added on Monday afternoon a disclaimer saying it was paid for by Larry Ellett ballot measure committee recall Newsom committee with major funding from Elder's gubernatorial campaign. The website on Tuesday scrubbed all of that. Gone. Look, how can you detect fraud when nobody voted yet? It's almost as if you tried to steal the election by invalidating millions of votes. You lost by millions of votes. Voters rejected Larry Elder by over 30 points. And that same website, by the way, also suggested that voters would have to open their ammo box if they can't trust the ballot box. How is that not stoking stochastic terrorism? It absolutely is. And so what this is a big lie. And now Elder has the gall to come out this morning and say, let us be gracious in defeat. We may have lost the battle, but we are going to win the war. So now here's the thing. A good chunk of his supporters think it's rigged. That's Republicans. Republican 101 now is, if there's an election that we lose, it's rigged. If we win, it was a fair election. But if we lose, it's rigged, obviously. Of course. Look, Trump called earlier, was talking to, I don't know, probably Newsmax or something, and said, oh, no, it's totally rigged. Totally rigged. Why can't they understand that they lost because less people voted for them? Look, to be fair, like I rag on the beanie man, Tim Pool, all the time. Tim Pool comes out and says, well, the reason that Larry Elder lost is because less people voted for him. Yes, I think he framed it as Republicans didn't turn out, which is probably also true. I mean, both things are true. He didn't get enough votes. Republicans didn't turn out. That's it. There's no conspiracy. It's not nefarious. Okay? But again, the Republicans have become the conspiracy theory party. They also, by the way, love to do projection because they are too often the ones that actually do voter fraud, as well as try to cheat by doing artificial voter suppression of minority groups. And that's not to say, by the way, because the California Democratic Party has its own issues with trying to keep themselves into power. Again, both parties gerrymander their districts so they're safe, drawing these weirdo districts. They're essentially, and this is insane, but you have politicians that literally draw their own district. Like, I want these voters because I know they're going to vote for me. And that's why you always get super safe districts. And then, of course, you have back in 2016 in the 2020 primaries, you had the establishment Democrats that definitely put their thumb in the scale for certain candidates, Joe Biden. And really, it was more of an effort to stop one particular candidate, Bernie Sanders. Get a well-placed phone call from Obama at a certain time. And then, golly gee, what happens? You get a bunch of campaigns that suspended and threw their weight behind Joe Biden, who they considered to be the stronger Democrat, versus Bernie Sanders, right before a crucial primary. And then, of course, you have other, examples, not in California or anything like that, but like, for example, in Ohio, where you have these groups, the FMI, dropping millions and millions of dollars of just completely dishonest ads during an Ohio primary. You also have issues, again, all over the country, where you have Democratic incumbents that get challenged by progressives, and they keep the voter data that should be accessible by members of the party. They keep it from these candidates so that they cannot, go and actually see who, votes for who and who votes for Democrats and be able to campaign. So none of these things, however, these are not dangerous or as dangerous. Don't get me wrong. I'm not minimizing. I'm not trying to downplay, the obvious favoritism the establishment has for establishment candidates against progressives. I'm just saying that it's not as dangerous as saying flat out that the other side cheated. And not only that, but adding, they cheated, get your guns. You see what I mean? The Democratic shenanigans in their primaries, and again, California Democrats are pretty famous for this, the Democratic Party, it's dirty. And there is an effect of turning off progressive voters. But right-wingers are flat out alleging, no. They literally stole the election with massive voter fraud, busing in people, Chinese ballots, just weirdo stuff. And what they do, and the reason, of course, they originally did that whole voter fraud lie was to get more restrictive voting laws in general elections, in order to basically prevent minority voters from being able to vote. And that's it. And look, now with Trump, of course, that evolved to even something more dangerous, where you end up having groups of heavily armed right-wingers going across the country, intimidating voters at polling sites. Plus, you had January 6th happen. They literally invaded a Capitol building. So obviously, while both are not good for the democratic process, they're also at varying levels of severity. All, of course, are problems. They have different effects, though, and different solutions. And so those are the issues that we actually have to tackle. We want to have a fair vote. We want to have good elections, and we want to have good representatives. So now that said, I'm glad Larry Elder got crushed. He didn't win the recall. But But I think he needs to be called out and shamed for his attempt to use this incredibly dangerous narrative, which in this case, thankfully, did not lead to violence, but it has, and it could lead to violence in other places. And believe me, Republicans will try in other places. They absolutely will, just like right-wingers all over the world have been trying the same thing. You know, and I've noticed, like, if America starts doing that, for example, America started saying, oh, everything's terrorism, 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 terrorism. Other governments, more oppressive governments, have been like, oh, we're going to do this crackdown based on terrorism. And now you see right-wing strongmen all over the world that are now saying, well, voter fraud, obviously. So that's dangerous. We do set a precedent in this world, and we got to crack down on the big lie and this entire narrative, this entire conspiracy that has just consumed the Republican Party. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.